around 2010, I had a spate of sightings. At that time, I was already doing paranormal investigation, helping people out, both coming at things, trying to tell people that you've got to look at both the paranormal and the extraterrestrial aspect and the spiritual aspect and bring the science to it, which is what I'm doing here now with Geiger counters and EVPs and magnetic field detectors and thermal cameras and infrared cameras. I've got basically everything you would see on shows is what I've got here decked out, and I've had that for years to document what I'm experiencing. Even the video in multidimensional where you can see even the greys, one of these beings blinking, it was actually an apparition form. There are intelligences that are living right next to us in different frequencies. Some are in the earth and occupying different mountains and under the ocean. Then you've got 3D extraterrestrials. Then you've got ones that have, we could say, ascended to new heights in their own evolutionary process. But when they showed me one time the makeup of the universe, basically what I was left with is that us and extraterrestrials are the bottom 5% of what exists. Yeah, you can't control what's in your airspace. Yeah, some of us living right next to us. But if we can't start getting a dialogue on the table, the people either one aren't going to get it when an experience happens, but they will eventually, or they can understand it. But it's just getting the wheels turning in one's mind as a civilization. But the other thing is too, I think that where I'm at now, that people don't need to know anything we're talking about unless they want to. As long as they're a good person, which is what this experience is about, the fruit and the knowledge, to me now that I know with the experiences, that unless there's fruit in terms of service to others, love, being the best version of yourself, involved with that experience, I couldn't care less. Yeah, the darker ones have taught me a lot, and they've taught me to find that place, because what I actually found with clearings and assisting people in my own dark experiences was that when I tapped into the heart space and I sat in that with non-judgment, going into a state where I'm observing the experience, but I connect to another state that's observing my body having this experience through it, the entities would just drop off and let go.
Our healthcare system. 0.
Welcome to Cosmic Convergence. Today we're thrilled to introduce our guest, Peter Maxwell Slattery, an international best-selling author, speaker, and spiritual advisor. Peter is well known for his ET contact experiences, which began at an early age and have continued throughout his life with hundreds of witnesses to these events. He now dedicates himself to helping others make their own spiritual connections, from finding purpose to connecting with spirit guides, soul family, and even extraterrestrial contact. Joining me are my fellow co-hosts, Daniel and John. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and stay updated on our latest interviews. Welcome to the show, Peter. Nice to have you.
Christian, thank you for having me, and also to Daniel and Jonathan. Cheers.
So just to start things off, for people that don't know you, how did you come in contact with this phenomena, the UFOs, UAP, the beings? How did you get into all this? What was that like for you that drew you to this?
It's always been with me. The main stuff that I talk about is from the age of 7 onwards. There's a couple of things before that that's been vague and a bit more recall over time. But I'd get, I wouldn't really say prophecies, predictions, but it would be information ahead of time that I'd tell my family. And even there was a couple of times we'd speak to the doctor about it. And the doctor's like, well, it's not negative. And, it couldn't be explained. So they just let it go. But my mother and stepfather got a house we moved into when I was 8, and from about 8 to 12, on a regular basis, not nightly, but it was quite regular, I would wake up to what I'll preface this with. The first time was Kurt Cobain in my bedroom. So I freaked out, and the room would be lit up from the peripheral of the curtains. And even looking back now, I believe he was still alive at this time. I don't think it was Kurt Cobain, because I was into Nirvana and into music. Looking back, I understand what was going on now. But there was an experience sometime after that where I'd wake up to Kurt Cobain, and there'd be what I'd describe as this being vibrating, that in between each pulse, it was like Kurt Cobain, and then very similar to your typical grey alien, but it was white. And its skin was like cigarette ash, that texture, sort of grainy, not completely smooth, and then it would go back to like extremely fast pulses to where you're seeing sort of two beings overlapping. And then there was times where there would be 3 of them in the room, and that was quite regular up until about 12. And then at 12 years old, when I was staying at my dad's house, a different house, I had my first sighting of a vehicle in the sky that, to me these days, still looks about this. I've seen the vehicle like years later as well. So, when you're a kid and you wonder, is that the size of what I saw as a kid? Because things can look bigger.
Right.
But yeah, this thing was about 3 times the size of a football field. It was a matte grey colour, and it looked more like a weight, like a disc, not a flying saucer, like a disc. Like if you pulled a weight off the end of a weight bar and you put it sideways, that's, so you rip one of them off and put it sideways, that's what it looked like. And it cut in front of this big hill in my hometown, Lavington, or Albury. Lavington's an outer suburb. And that was it. I've said 100 times, I didn't go on about it, didn't talk about it. Years later, I found out that a family member was also having experiences that were at that time as well in that home, in my mum and stepdad's house. And I just got on with life, just being a high school kid, getting into music and running amok. But I did have a large occurrence that I didn't really think anything until looking back at it, of shadow man activity, other UFO sightings, paranormal phenomena of objects being picked up and thrown and things of that nature. So yeah, that's sort of just in a thumbnail sketch, just an introduction of how this started. But I wasn't thinking extraterrestrial. I wasn't even thinking alien. Of course, I started to think that with the UFO sighting, of course, of the vehicle. But before that, with what are typically, these days known as the grey, though they're not grey, these intelligences, I just didn't think anything of it, really, which is so weird, for some people. I guess everyone's got their own come from with this, of course, but yeah, that's just a brief introduction anyway.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, everyone has their own perspectives, and some of the weird stuff that I'm starting to look back at my own previous experiences and starting to ask, like, what was that? Was that actually a departed spirit, or was that something else? And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And with you being from Australia, I wanted to ask, what is the viewpoint on UFOs, UAPs, ETs in Australia, from the government to the people themselves, if you know?
I've got a different spin on this, probably from most that you would talk to. Of course, I've spoken to people in government here and abroad. I just try to do my own thing. I was very much ridiculed in the early days. I was thrown on the news. Around 2010, I had a spate of sightings. At that time, I was already doing paranormal investigation, helping people out, both coming at things, trying to tell people that you've got to look at both the paranormal and the extraterrestrial aspect and the spiritual aspect, and bring the science to it, which is what I'm doing here now with Geiger counters and EVPs and magnetic field detectors and thermal cameras and infrared cameras. I've got basically everything you would see on shows is what I've got here decked out, and I've had that for years to document what I'm experiencing. So at that time in 2010, I had a friend that was there for a number of sightings, and I even had a brain scan back then wondering what was going on. But people like, you're filming this, we're seeing it with you. I contact Australian Air Services. They're telling me nothing was in the sky at that time where I was having these experiences and filming them. And so somehow the news got a hold of it, did a piece. And not long after that, I ended up on another show, which is equivalent to sort of like Good Morning America. Again, I didn't go looking for it. It just happened. But I found that this community, which I prefer not to be a part of, the UFO community or even any community, will eat their young.
Oh yeah.
And I saw that at my first conference when I got introduced to go and do that. I actually do more overseas than I do in this country. I haven't been invited to anything for years yet. I'll get called up to go to America or wherever and go and do something. And so I just found it's almost like if investigators couldn't make you a case, which at this time I'd already emailed the top investigators in this country after I was known, then they wanted to work with me. And the only person that reached back was Mary Rodwell, who's been working with thousands of people for years, who's a well-known hypnotherapist, and she's in my documentary Multidimensional. And she's worked with the Edgar Mitchell Foundation and done a lot overseas as well. So because of that, I was going through these experiences, wanting to know what the hell is going on, ridiculed by my entire hometown, basically at that stage after going on the news, because I'm thinking, well, I was ignorant, thinking I've got evidence, I've got witnesses, this is going to change the world, knowing also at the same time that going back to Roswell, going to, Betty and Barney Hill, going to Travis Walton, going to the Rendlesham Forest incident, going to the Phoenix Lights, and on and on and on, nothing had changed anything previously. And even Westall 66, which is a big case where 200 students and teachers witnessed vehicles that actually landed at a school, which was huge. So I was ignorant, which actually killed my ego getting back on a plane after being on mainstream media going, who am I to think I can change the world or anyone's perspective? Like, unless you're open to this, experience something like this, or open to investigating this, by all means, I should be considered insane. So the come from that I had at that point was doing intense meditation, becoming a meditation teacher, getting into yoga, getting into Reiki. I was already doing sky watches, you could say CE5, since around 2010, where we've got a lot of daytime activity, and a lot of this is documented, of course, as well. People can see it in the movies or YouTube channels and what have you. But I sort of just did my own thing in Australia to the point where, getting known to a certain point, I had people from all walks of life, doctors, first responders, school teachers, truck drivers, people from all walks of life contacted me just to share their experiences, because they too they might have, like, from what I know, a lot of people do report stuff back then which still wouldn't even probably be 1% or 10%, which is still a lot of people wanting to share their experiences, and they were in the same boat as me. So I started investigating, and sometimes driving up to 9 hours to go and see somebody and help them with their experiences. So I know that's a brief runaround, but it also explains my come from, and why I don't have much to do with the community here. We could say elsewhere as well. I just prefer to do my own thing. And to sort of build a thick skin to me. Like I said, you're experiencing this. And now I know a lot more than what I did back then, but I still realize how little I do know from that, because things keep changing and evolving, and a lot of things that the beings communicate to me are usually stepping stones to the next stepping stone, eventually in some cases getting to actually what they're relaying, because it can be such far out the realms of the human brain and its normal comprehension of things that it needs to be done in sort of drips and drabs, in downloads, we could say. So, but look, I will say, even recently, I've had mainstream television shows and newspapers wanting to do pieces on me here, and I've declined respectfully. But it's like, who's meant to talk to me will find me. They'll find me, and I'm don't need all the other stuff. I don't need the attention. I don't even need the advertising. It's just, I'm doing what I'm doing. But there has been a big change. I've seen it, especially even with doing some American media, the openness now. And like I was saying, even on television 12 years ago, these beings are multidimensional. They're like ghosts.
Yeah.
And back then it was like, this guy is just completely gone nuts. But now we're seeing, even through the Pentagon, we're seeing with Skinwalker Ranch, and a lot of the people I've communicated with, I'll say, are starting to take that stance, which...
I think it's incredibly important to listen to the specific words that Gresh uses. Gresh never said extraterrestrial or alien. He said interdimensional. I think that that's incredibly important, because those are the types of things that when we go in there, there's just certain things that I think that it's important that you guys listen to on that.
It isn't merely that we're being visited from guys from other star systems, nor is it just the fact that people are dropping in from other galaxies. That's a given, and that's true, and all of the above. When I retired in '76, the Army at the time had just learned that, my God, we're being visited by guys who are popping through portals from other dimensions. Now, if you think that didn't blow their minds.
Multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross.
When it's still light, but it's not bright light, and that spectrum, you'll see an object more easily.
Okay.
But I think it has to do with, I don't think it has to do with the actual innate occurrence. I think it has to do with
what we can see.
What we can see with these things.
Okay.
Are ours.
That makes a lot of sense. When you're talking transdimensional, how do I even ask this? When we're talking other dimensions, what does that mean?
Well, the universe, let's call it the cosmos, it's described by astrophysicists as sort of this 3D thing. Now, if you look at quantum entanglement and the concepts of the universe being a holographic conscious entity, which it is, then you start talking about not just material, but you're also talking about other dimensions that are at refined levels of frequencies and vibration. So the speed of light, the speed of electrons, atoms, what have you, all of that would pertain to what we call the 3D, three-dimensional. If you were to cross over that in frequencies, and this is, again, where you start getting into some very strange WSFM, like I mentioned, phenomena, then you're talking about other embedded dimensions, but it's not like it's some distant place, it's folded within. So, a hologram, if you look at a hologram of Marilyn Monroe with her dress blowing up, like that. Mm-hmm. If you were to just zoom in on one little piece of that dress on the edge of her skirt, and zoom in on it, the entire image would be in there, and zoom in again, it's holographic. So you have to kind of get your mind around the cosmos is this conscious quantum hologram. And so there are many, many, many dimensions, not just this plane of 3D, that is all enfolded within it. So a lot of the confusion happens where everything like something weird, like a poltergeist event, will be conflated with something extraterrestrial. Well, it isn't. The confusion comes in is that if you're an interstellar capable civilization, which means you're going from point A in the cosmos to here, B, it's like if this were a piece of paper, you're not going a straight line across the paper, you're folding the paper, being space-time.
Okay.
And so these 2 points are here.
I'm enlightened now.
And so, but in the process of doing that, the sort of bending and altering space-time, you then bump up against and cross these other dimensions. And this is sort of the intersection between what some people call metaphysics and physics, or the conscious worlds and the worlds of light, if you will, the mystics would call astral, and extraterrestrial technologies. And it's a very interesting intersection. I find that the most interesting part of this whole subject, but it quickly, you have to be, you go into crazy town way too quickly with a lot of people out there who don't know enough to talk about it intelligently, in my opinion. And this is why Ben Rich, who is the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, said, and I have 3 people who were there when he said it at a lecture, UCLA, School of Engineering. And he said, this is in, I believe, 1995. He was at the end of his career. And he had taken Kelly Johnson's place, who was founded the Skunk Works, the Lockheed Skunk Works, a U-2 spy plane, all that. And he said, someone asked, how would these extraterrestrial civilizations communicate? And he said, every point in space and time is connected to every other point in space and time in real time, instantly. And that's how they're doing it.
Is what I was saying 15 years ago. You've got to grab the paranormal, the UFO, the spiritual, and the science, and know that you don't know what you don't know, come at it with a blank canvas and start it from that way. And also, I think people that do have gifts like, I don't like the word psychic, but let's say that are intuitive, that can help with that as well. Because even recently we had a group here, and I actually got the group to, through a technique, to tune in consciously. And I said, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, but let's see if you can get a direction and a time that phenomena will appear. And a lot of people were dead on. Mm-hmm. So that's showing a way that we're interfacing, and very much so, like you start talking about this, this can even initiate an experience, as you guys know, just talking about this.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
I've had investigators before, one in particular where he had to talk to me, but he didn't want to. He said, I'll probably have an experience after this, and I haven't for 20 years. And I found out straight after he had another experience. It doesn't mean it's because of me, but because we're talking about it, he knew how this works. And all of a sudden, he's had his first experience in 20 years and then goes in hiding again because it's just too much for some people, understandably.
Thank you for that. And I completely agree with you. The perspective has changed. We're having hearings and stuff. Even the whole interdimensional aspect, which I found through hypnotherapy and even near-death experiencers talking about this. I've gone through many. That's what I've researched for the past 11 years. Even Paula Luna, a representative of Florida, has mentioned when they were questioning her on television, saying, I can't talk about what happened in that meeting, but all I can say is, whenever they mention interdimensional, pay attention to that, is what she says. And then she walked off.
Yeah. So, again, thank you, Peter, for being on the show. It's a pleasure to have you. I just wanted to mention really quick, I personally have had that awareness in my own life. Like 2 months ago, we had a friend, I can't say who, she's still not fully wanting to come out with the experience, but she had a craft and interaction with beings and stuff, and she never knew anything about NHI, but she's been in contact with us and stuff, and that was interesting. So yeah, that's 100% like the phenomenon like seems to be able to spread through different people and stuff, and they have these crazy experiences if they're open to it. One thing I did want to kind of ask you when you were talking about your experiences as a child, how it reflected to you in a way that it was a person you admired, where there was like, do you feel like they were the beings were reflecting that figure to you because it was a safe person for you to have that interaction going on? And also, do you think that they were fully gray, or do you think that they were some other type of being, or like where does that line and also, if you can't answer that, it's totally fine, because I know that we're all having the conversation as well of like where is that line between NHI, are they fully physical, are they hyperdimensional, are they a light being, like what plane are we actually interacting with, and like, or is it just all the above?
Well, it's all above and beyond. From my experience, I can't prove this to you guys, though I've got hundreds of witnesses. And look, as an example, with what you're starting with, I've had communication with these intelligences for years, those ones specifically, like conscious, like people. As an example, John Vivanco, the remote viewer, if you've heard of John Vivanco, he's a well-known remote viewer. He's been doing this for over 25 years, has worked for government and corporate intelligence and different things. When they were remote viewer, he's worked with up to 40 remote viewers on me to work out if I was telling the truth or not. And John's actually come and stayed here, and I've hanged out with him in the States. They remote viewed me to see if I was telling the truth or not. And what happened was those specific beings started visiting them physically. I even know recently in the last few weeks, they got a physical visit again. So those specific beings, one of them projected that form, yes, to not freak me out. And I said to him, well, it freaked me out more than what you guys look like. But recently I was shown exactly what they look like, and they're actually white light beings. There are intelligences that look similar that are grown here on Earth. There are also ones that are us in the future that went throughout this sector of the solar system and also the Zeta Reticuli. This is where I can go off the wall and I never talk about this stuff. And I don't expect any single person to believe me. This is why I don't talk about a lot of it. And then there are variations of them throughout, not just the Milky Way, but going beyond and also transdimensionally. So I get almost nightly regular visits from them as well. I'll say that just quickly. They do pop in quite regularly. And even the video in multidimensional where you can see even the greys, one of these beings blinking, it was actually an apparition form. And there was a lot of crap I got for that video as well. And Jason Gleaves, ex-UK Air Force Aerospace, and he's in the UK. He goes through a lot of the stuff and gets the originals. And he's the one that blew it up, picked it up. It's actually, this thing's blinking. But that wasn't fully materialized. And that's how they appear a lot of the time, like apparitions. There are, like, just to get to the, the base of this in a very linear and broken down way, there are intelligences that are living right next to us in different frequencies. Some are in the earth and occupying different mountains and under the ocean. Then you've got 3D extraterrestrials. Then you've got ones that have, we could say, ascended to new heights in their own evolutionary process as a being, as an intelligence. And then you got, like I say, when they showed me one time the makeup of the universe, basically what I was left with is that us and extraterrestrials are the bottom 5% of what exists. Even with going into other like density states of beings overlapping here in other planetary bodies and other star systems, that's not even 5% when they pulled me through these other complete different realms where there's no stars and there's no planets. And then they took me into what I call like the geometric light realms and then into source. And when they show me this universe and then all the other universes, which are their own, you could say God with its own planes and dimensions within it, I had to stop there. So there's a lot of stuff that even recently with my most recent book, Ascending, the UFO and paranormal connection. I can't even remember what it's called. I've done that much stuff now, but it was earlier this year. I've done 13 books now, but it was a tell-all story of what's gone on and stuff that I've sat on for 10 years. And so I sit on a lot of this and I won't say stuff unless I'm certain, but those intelligences, the way it was put to me was that they're part of a house of Gabriel, angelic. I didn't want to go into that. I didn't want to go into the blue orbs with the Elohim. This is stuff I don't want to go into, but I do now because I'm just like having an effort moment because I've got to tell it like it is. But so many years, like I was saying, I get so much crap. People didn't want to hear what I had to say. Doesn't mean that I'm right. Doesn't mean that I'm wrong to them if they just look at it for what it is and start to see the commonalities from others. Because I've spoken to people that are theologians and connected to the UN and all these other people. They're all listening and they know what I know. They wanted to know how I knew and I wanted to know how they knew. Which they knew it was from me with contact. I'd never get answers from them. So there are extraterrestrials, but I'd say that a large majority of what's going on is government or is connected to Earth that we are seeing or is from completely different realms. And yeah, we still have extraterrestrial visitors. So I know, again, that's a roundabout way that I've gone to answer that, but it's just through contact, conscious contact. A large majority of what I've experienced is in a waking state, which is why they've wanted to bring me to the United States and be tested biologically and on devices, which I won't do, because they know what's going on here. So I know who some of these beings are, but there is also negative influences, which is why you have to be extremely careful with the way that you go about opening up to having an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this is other aspects of yourself that you could perceive as a demonic or a dark intelligence. It's actually yourself that will, in some cases, project the dark experience to see how you respond before you could, say, go to the next level in your own evolutionary process. The Tibetans go on about this, and some might see it as the seven heavens or different realms that these intelligences are connected to that can first appear dark. But yes, there are reptilian beings. I've had physical experiences as well as multidimensional experiences with them. I've had experiences with demonic entities. I've been choked. I've been picked up. I've had all that happen. So when people say that you physically can't be hurt or that there's nothing negative in the universe, I'll just take that, very lightly to people that are new to this, that I went into this wanting to know exactly what's going on. And for my part, I know, but it keeps evolving. But there is stuff in the middle. When you say trickster, it's a very blank term, depending on culture, depending on if this intelligence in some cases is an egregore, which is being created by a group consciousness, or a tulpa where an individual can create that consciousness. Mm-hmm. And then there is stuff that's very ancient, very old, that are on the lands, not just here, but especially over there as well, throughout the globe, where there are intelligences that if you respond positively, you're going to get a positive experience. You act negatively, you will get a negative experience amplified. And but look, it is very layered. Like you may have heard with the other interviews that you may have heard with me speaking about, some of these beings, if you imagine let's say, just as an example, a flying saucer is an apparition, like a ghost, it can land on you in bed. And most of the time people aren't going anywhere. They can land on you in bed, and a lot of the time you may get like a whoomp, 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 or hear a high ringing pitch in sync with that, or one or the other. And in your mind, in your mind's eye, it will appear as a physical experience that now you're on board a craft, that you are looking up at them. They can even pull your consciousness out, put it into an avatar, or pull you in a non-corporeal state on board the craft, and you're now resonating with it. It's a real experience, but you haven't gone anywhere. You're actually exactly where you were. You've changed frequencies, just like if you can see the dimensions and the densities, because dimensions are really within the densities. You see them as television stations, and your body computer is now the television screen that's experiencing this reality. You change the channel. You haven't gone anywhere. So these beings have those capabilities, and I've had people have those experiences with me even after doing CE5 or initiating contact, where I've warned them, when you go to bed tonight, unless you want the experience, do a clearing, because you may end up in one case on board with me. And the next day they're like, what the hell? Like, that was absolutely amazing. And they got it. But yet these beings can also physically materialize as well. So it's not like people want it like black and white. And it's like the gray area in the middle is so vast, where a lot of the answers do lie in a lot of different scenarios. But talking to even ancient elders here and even over there, there's been a couple of times they said people a lot of times aren't going anywhere. The craft, that's exactly what the crafts do in some cases. And so we're in a predicament, like I was saying, getting back to the paranormal, to spirituality, really got to be blended and looked at. But then again, each thing can be something different that you interface with, or it'll be regular things that you can be interfacing with that happen to be from different places or different frequencies. And that can be very convoluted for people to get, because I know how full on it's been for me to actually absorb this. So, and living it is quite a different thing than researching it. And as you guys know, you start talking about it, researching it. So many times I've pulled well-known researchers, especially when I'm in America, aside, and I'm like, so tell me, what have you experienced? And they're like, what? And they're a proper researcher with a PhD. And then after a few minutes, I go, I've never told anyone this. And then they'll tell me an experience. And I know all the time, they've usually had an experience. If they haven't getting into it, they have some time after investigating this. And I can understand not talking about it, but we're at the point now that let's just get everything on the table. You know, it's at that point.
I agree with that. It's time to put everything out there. You know, enough of the, well, I got something I can say, but it's not really my place. And I understand there's a lot of danger in putting out some information, especially from people that are coming now from the government, about what they know, what they've been witness to, that, you know, they have to look out for their own welfare. But it just comes to a point to where, you know, we've been dealing with this for, I believe, longer than 70, 80 years. I think this is like dawn of mankind kind of thing here. And I often wonder if ancient civilizations were probably more open about it than we ever have been. We're supposed to be like so much more advanced. But that's for a whole other discussion. I just want to say one thing about Kurt Cobain, and then we can go on with this. I've personally met Kurt Cobain after a concert. The whole band came out to get on the tour bus, and he stopped by. We had a cigarette together. So also just really had a great experience with Kurt Cobain. And, you know, if an entity were to show up to me, that would be one that I would choose too, because he was a really nice guy. But, you know, that goes a lot with what Jacques Vallée and other people have said, that a lot of times, at least through the first contact experience or early on in contact experiences, they will take a form for your safety and for theirs, of course, of something that we can perceive as being friendly or, you know, copacetic with, I guess you could say. So, like, you know, and then I know that there are stories of some experiencers, like they'll grow older, like they'll have experiences with an entity that might show up as a cartoon character when they're a little kid, and then when they get older, the entity may not realize that they don't believe in that cartoon character as being real anymore, and then they kind of like, okay, wait a minute, I kind of have to shift my perspective. But what I found interesting is when you were talking about the vibration, or the whoom, 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 and like the sounds and stuff. As we're all experiencers here in this podcast right now. So we can have some similarities in our experiences, and yet our experiences can also be very personal, right? And what I want to ask Peter is, at any point in time, at first I was going to ask if it was like in the beginning stages, but you were young. Could you describe for somebody that has never had an experience, okay, with contact with an entity or a group of entities, that moment of, and this is really tricky for me to ask, so I apologize. I'm not intentionally trying to stumble on this, but as an experiencer, I know the feeling, but it's not just a physical, it's an internal, where it's almost like reality around you changes. Like for myself personally, it's not just a sound, but it's almost like dimensions are lining up in a different way. It's some kind of, when you describe that the craft could actually just like land on you and you're not really going anywhere, right? But you have this perspective that in your mind's eye that you are. It's kind of like that. My fiance and I, we call it the snow globe effect, where everything else is closed off from you. We can feel the energy, darn near crackle in the atmosphere around us. The pressure seems to drop. Everything is at a standstill. And then that's when the contact starts happening. But you can feel it, not just physically, but within your entire being. And it just leaves a sense of awe. Have you had any experiences like that where you're just like, whoa, and it just hits you?
So about 12 years ago, I was regularly visited by a lady that's actually a light being, but would appear as a physical humanoid lady that explains she was from the Pleiades, Merope or Merope, depending on how you explain it. The actual star, not a planet, which was like, what? For starters. Now, in those 6 months of regular contact, she's the one that actually spoke to me when I was 7 in my mind, which is a female energy. And sometimes audible voice. So equivalent to putting your chin on an acoustic guitar when you play it and you can feel the reverberation. Now, in all cases for me, I've always got an energy sensation, like it's almost like a tense machine, but not like it. Every single aspect of the body, the molecular structure is just buzzing. And that effect you're saying, to me, it's almost like you're in your own envelope or you're in your own orb. And there could be a second of time go outside of that, like normally, but in that envelope you could have 15 minutes of dialogue, and it could be like hours of dialogue just transferred into your consciousness like a USB stuck in your brain, just boom. So when I'm interfacing, in a lot of cases, I'm getting flashes of imagery, even in my mind, even if I can physically see them, and I'm getting all thoughts and feelings to do with that information. To the point that around that time when I started filming the crafts, I'd start to get vertigo because I'd start to be on board the craft while I'm filming it, having the same thing that would happen, like that I'm explaining, the same thing occur. And there is a change where everything around that, like I haven't watched television for 15 years. The odd thing on YouTube or what have you still, but just everything, the way that you eat, that you treat others. I've always been quite fit and had a strict exercise regime, and that's developed as well. Doing karate and all different things, but these are the byproducts that I didn't understand at the time what was actually happening. But there's an occurrence that happens where it's about how you deal with the experience, because the experiences are very individual based, but they're also showing you, if you take it that route of you finding your place in what's actually going on, even though we're all one consciousness interfacing with itself. And so I get those very similar effects with all intelligences. I have been teleported off world. That was through the Elohim, which would originally appear as blue orbs that then turned into 7-foot tall blue liquid light beings, like electric energy, and then into columns of light that they would Like back then, what they were doing was coming in as an orb, going into a column, back into an orb, and then it would like expand and engulf me, and then we would just appear physically at another location. So, you know, those are overwhelming experiences that I've been having for years, and especially like how I was integrating it back then, and I still wouldn't talk about it. Then you've got the aspect that some of these beings are meditating on another planet, in another star system, that can physically project themselves in front of you. Up to and including, and this happened about a year and a half ago in my bedroom, which just to even this day puts a lot of what I can talk about to a very minimal impact standard compared to what happened, which was I had a dream and I was in a realm that was constructed of rainbow light. It was like ribbons of rainbow energy, and I'm in it with this gentleman that had a golden chest piece and a white robe and a white beard and long white hair, and it was more sort of like a bronzy tan color, so not white, not black or any. It was sort of in between. You know, like how people would tan themselves in the 80s. You know, like
The
Arnold
Trump tan.
Schwarzenegger and all that. Yeah. And this gentleman had a staff, and he said, just think of somewhere and go there. But it was sort of stern. And I started to think of places that I'd been off world as well as on Earth. And we would just start appearing there. And then we're back at this realm after a few seconds of doing that, not long at all. And there was this golden paved walkway that went up to a golden complex, like a temple complex. And I walked in there, and there was different beings in there. And then all of a sudden, I actually wake up to about 5 foot off the ground, a golden tablet with script on it that's lighting up the entire room. So that first part, I was asleep. It was a dream. But then I wake up from that dream to a levitating golden tablet that started to project the same rainbow energy in the dream from it, with script flashing a million miles an hour, as I screamed in ecstasy and turned away after a few seconds, because it was one of the most, probably the most intense thing I've ever experienced. And then the whole room's lit up after I'm opening up my eyes to see if this thing's still there. I turned back and it continued for 10 seconds or what have you, and then it just imploded in on itself. What's that about?
Those experiences to where the human language, in no matter what form it is just not good enough of a descriptor as to what you've actually experienced. Is what I term as otherworldly, but it happens, and it's just like you had mentioned the some people having negative experiences and some people having positive experiences and some people having both. I'm a person that has had both. To me, it's just the universe being dualistic in nature, trying to learn about itself through these different life forms, including our own, right? And so it's learning about itself through our experiences. But my fiance, I mentioned to you that we do spirit box sessions, and we're in contact with these beings that talk about things that we don't ask direct questions about. Sometimes they will, and then other times they'll just throw things out like clones, get on the spacecraft, and all this other stuff, which we have recorded. We just have to go through them all. But it's just like she's also had a strangulation attempt with nothing physically that we could see with our perceptions that we are told that we have, but she can feel it trying to strangle her. She feels it going around her when I'm off into the bathroom and I come out and she's in the kitchen and she's like ghost white. I'm like, what the, are you okay? And she's like, I can finally breathe now. I felt it go around me and I felt it grabbing my throat. I've had a time to where I was dreaming and I woke up and I was feeling myself coming out of my body, and it was a wild sensation because I could see, but not with my eyes. I could see with my soul, and I could see my arm, like in the bed in a certain way, kind of pointing towards her direction. And I heard this music, but not with these ears, through my soul. And I was hit with immediate bliss, a bliss I had never truly felt except for one time. It was a different bliss, though, that one, which was a beautiful, positive experience. this was different. It was this bliss. And my automatic thought, my, I guess, soul thought, it's weird, again, human language. Oh my God, they're here. It was a first thing, bam, right in my head. They're here in the room. I have to tell Melissa. I have to tell her. Bliss, unexplainable bliss. And it just went whoop, fear, bam, fear, because I'm feeling this hand on the side of my face, because I'm laying on this side, there's a pillow, and I'm feeling this hand on the side of my face like this. But it's not just my own physical face. I don't know, again. And I'm able to look in between my fingers and see this dark, shadowy figure. And this music is playing, but suddenly it changes. It's like this backwards Jack in the Box. And then again, that fear hits, and it says, it's time to go, in this warped voice. And I'm still trying to gather what's going on, you know? I mean, this is all strange and new to me, right? Even with past experiences, this is completely different. And so I'm trying to remain calm, and I say, okay, let me just tell Melissa that I'll be right back. And this voice again with the music and everything, you're not coming back. Well, when facing that situation where it's just slamming you right then and there, you have no preparation time. I said, well, I'm not going. And then I felt my body go back in, and then I woke up screaming and yelling and stuff, but I still felt that hand imprint on the side of my face for a good 20 minutes. But no redness or anything like that. It was an imprint on my soul. So they can, the way I try to reason it, I don't have a perfect explanation for it. And thank you for listening to the very abridged version of this story, Peter. I don't mean to make it about me, but
No.
I'd like to have your feedback on this, because I've asked
I was
others.
actually going to go sort of, and it makes sense why I was getting what I was getting in terms of where I was going to go with this. So, and I'm not saying this is the case now. I will say that in some experiences and examples, those experiences where you hear music is actually the vibration of realms or the beings themselves, because their light body overlaps ours. And this is where I can go into the rainbow body, the Merkaba, because they're actually interchangeable and they're all part of the same thing.
And
But
before you go further on that, because I was going to ask you about the Merkaba, so please continue with that thought. I wanted to interject this really fast about the music. Okay, her and I, you know, I'm a 90s was when I was in my 20s, right? And I used to go to raves a lot, right? So when we just in the house, we listened to a lot of trance music, okay? And that's what that music was. This entity is learning what we enjoy and trying to institute or implement it into the experience. See what I mean? Because then there was another one
no,
where
100%.
I had this choir kind of music over with it.
Yeah.
But it was still like, wait, I know what you're trying to do at that point, right? So, but it's still very true about what you say about like vibration, frequency, music, tonality, and all that other stuff that goes through traveling and, you know, dimensional fabric, and being able to I'm sorry, I'm really messing up my words, but being able to interact with us in certain ways. That's definitely for sure. But I found it interesting that they were using that methodology to try to make that connection, whether it be negative or positive. But I'll be quiet.
That's why there's some cases, like the Kurt Cobain thing, you could say it's an analogy of what you're saying with that. It's something you used to listen to, and it's not always 100% in anything, but as an example, so your light body goes out around you, and depending on the intelligence and where they're at, they can read that like a book that stores everything about you. So a positive intelligence, if you want to perceive, I don't see good and bad anymore. Even though I'm talking about bad and good, I've got to do that just for linear reasons. Just with where I'm at, I get it. And I can't make anyone else get it. It's just I get it now, and that can grow even more. But there's a part with this where, because they can read you like a book, if it's let's say positive intelligence, just for all intents and purposes, they can see all the good, the bad you've done, and they've got compassion, love, and non-judgment. Where something coming out, we could say now, let's say from a lower frequency, they can trigger traumas, events, get you on psychic mind loops on something that happened 20 years ago, which is a psychic attack, bring you into a lower vibratorial state. Now, going into what you experienced, and I've found this over and over because there's so many houses I've gone to and helping people where they thought they were having a paranormal experience, and in some cases I said you may want to look at extraterrestrial multidimensional experiences, and there's some cases where they thought they were having multidimensional extraterrestrial experiences and the house was haunted with intelligent residual haunting. It could have even been something that was Bigfoot nearby or fairies or what have you. So it depends on where one has come from. But I'll give an example, let's say sleep paralysis. Now, sleep paralysis, which in some cases it's not, though you were frozen. If you've got a bad dream as an example and you wake up from a nightmare and you're frozen and you've got pressure on you and it feels like, the way I explained, your heart being pulled down into your stomach, that's not a good experience. But if somebody's not informed or knowledgeable on this through experience, let alone, we could say, the theory of researching people's stories and what have you, there are some cases that it's you actually coming back into your physical body, and as to you getting back into your physical body without full recall, you're freaking out, the body's freezing. There's even some cases where it could be intelligences that you're well acquainted with on a high dimensional state, that, let's say, friends or family, what have you, that are freezing you, because if you turn around in their presence, you're going to freak out. But yet the person could perceive it as a negative experience because they were frozen and they're freaking out, but they usually won't have the nightmare or, like I said, the heart being pulled down into the stomach. And when they do that, that is them operating in a state of energy, even though we still don't understand what energy is, but let's say a non-corporeal state that overlaps the dimensions, that when they're holding you, it is not just touching you physically, though you can feel it like an energetic sensation, almost like the equivalent in some cases, I'll say, like static electricity, where you're rubbing your feet on the carpet and you touch somebody if you've got shoes on. Or a weird one is if you get a battery where the positive and negative is on one end, you put it on your tongue. You ever do that when you were a kid? We used to do that at school. But that static, acidy electric energy is what some of these intelligences are operating at. So they're able to go from, influence that state down onwards. And so it is very common what you describe, that you could still feel that 20 minutes later. And sometimes people will feel that too, with residual energy that's starting to fade from attachments, even energetic implants. Some of the most far out stuff, though, I know to be true myself, that these things are operating and they're able to do things that are capable of a multidimensional nature, not just with their own intelligence, but even with intelligent devices that are conscious in some states that are operating, we could say, on the astral or etheric planes. So this is where it gets very laid, because even if you go into Tibetan culture again, which I will bring up, which I didn't understand for years, but I started having experiences with rainbow beings from Orion and some other intelligences, and everything kept coming back to these rainbow light beings. And then come to find out, and I've spoken to people like that are very knowledgeable on the Tibetan rainbow body, that, like Namkai Norbu said, who's no longer with us, the rainbow body teachings are being taught in 13 star systems. And this is where a lot of these beings and their crafts, they can even just consciously project. I've even seen a document once that was referring to some of the triangular craft, the three beings in their Merkaba, that joint project the craft. And I know that to be true. I can't prove that. My query to this government document, that I had a chance to speak to somebody that was part of running a department at that time, said to me they got no idea how that was sort of knowledgeable information and known to be fact, because it was written like it was fact. But they were highly aware, which is why somebody slipped it to me that was very knowledgeable in the department. So for the average person, like I've spoken to people in the Air Force and abroad and other governments, where it's like, at least give them the ET concept to digest first and go multidimensional later. Yeah, you can't control what's in your airspace. Yeah, some of us living right next to us, but if we can't start getting a dialogue on the table, the people, either one, aren't going to get it when an experience happens, but they will eventually, or they can understand it. But it's just getting the wheels turning in one's mind as a civilization. But the other thing is too, I think that where I'm at now, that people don't need to know anything we're talking about unless they want to. As long as they're a good person, which is what this experience is about, the fruit and the knowledge. To me, now that I know with the experiences, that unless there's fruit in terms of service to others, love, being the best version of yourself involved with that experience, I couldn't care less. Yeah, the darker ones have taught me a lot, and they've taught me to find that place, because what I actually found with clearings and assisting people in my own dark experiences was that when I tapped into the heart space and I sat in that with non-judgment, going into a state where I'm observing the experience, but I connect to another state that's observing my body having this experience through it, the entities would just drop off and let go. That's where it all led me to.
The entity that tried to strangle Melissa still remained in the house, just for closure of that story, or that occurrence. Yep. It's not a story. It was still lingering in the house. It punched me in the heart soon afterwards, and I was like, okay, I felt a punch in my heart, and I sat down. Disclosure, haha, no pun intended. And initially, I had a heart attack 5 years ago. This was last year. I told the two gentlemen on the panel about it. Okay. Her and I decided to, at that point in time, to meditate on the love that we had for each other and offer it to the negative being. And we actually heard a recording on the spirit box was going on at the time of it leaving. You could hear that. And it was. Yep. Okay. And then before we closed off the session, what we believe to be a positive entity said, "We bought him time." And that was one of the last messages we heard. And then the experience that I told you about, that I woke up to, we'll put it that way, was 3 days, I believe it was 3 days later. So, but we showed love, and that's really what it comes to, I believe. And I know that there's going to be some people out there that are going to disagree with me, that it's not just I love my car, or, I love that song. It's like this universal love. People say that the universe is, and everything in creation is created out of love. But if you have, people have said to me, well, how can you love such a demon, or whatever negative connotation that they put on it? And it's like, well, what you do is you have to realize that they are a part of you in some way, shape, or form. And if you accept that within yourself, and you love that part of yourself, right? And you can then offer it to the other, and then it becomes that being's choice whether it wants to accept it and not be service to self so much, right? And start seeing the service to others, or they're just going to go on their way. And so at least temporarily they went on their way. And I'm sorry for, again, interjecting with all of this, but it's fascinating. And I, like you could tell people about the experience, and it's a shame that we can't, I don't know about the negatives, but it's a shame that we can't just be like, okay, here, have the experience, touch their finger or something, and then they're like, whoa, and then they could be like, yeah, wow, now I see what you're talking about, and I was able to experience what you experienced.
Well, they can hear. I can tell you that they can hear. Everyone that's been here has, like, we even had a person that was in the Air Force walking around. We're talking about this static ball of energy that you can put your hand in, and the Geiger counter is going right off, as well as the EMF, and you could follow it around the property.
Wow.
Like, and the flashes, you can see a lot of this on the YouTube now. If orbs, a few feet off the ground in the house, like, and it's not going, but you can experience this stuff. And there's places around the world that you don't have to go anywhere, but there are places like ECETI Ranch. I can vouch for that 100%. That this stuff is going on. And then you've got, of course, Skinwalker, and there's so many other ranches over there, let alone around the world, that this stuff's going on. But, getting back to that, what you're saying, so, like, my conclusion with where I'm at the moment is that it's about embracing also the human experience. That what I've experienced here compared to other worlds, this, like, whether it's, hugging somebody, or the smell of a rose or a plant, or the way that we can interface with each other on a human level. This is very unique in this way. And we don't realize our true capability, which is a bit frustrating at times, not from an anger point of view, but looking at the world with where it's at with the division. And it doesn't mean we all need to get 100% along or be okay with other cultures, customs, this, that, the other, that we could perceive as positive or negative. But we're in a situation where there are thousands of nuclear weapons. And it's like, we need to be sovereign. This is what I say to people too. These beings are not to be looked up to. It's my opinion that out of body, we know it all. That this is something we crack up laughing at on an energetic level, going, whoa, that was an experience. To lose yourself, to refine yourself, and gaining knowledge for their overall collective, like that you pointed out, Jonathan, because it's very much my understanding from that. And we already are an unbounded being that loses that state to refine that state in the ascension process. Some people might go on about a ninth dimensional Pleiadian. Well, I'm like, that's cool, but you might be a ninth dimensional Pleiadian, but it's really an aspect because all your lives are happening at the same time. You're here now, and it's about elevating this pinpoint of your awareness. If you can perceive your highest expression like a basketball or a spider web with the core of it, the higher self with all the tentacles going out, having different experiences, that even when you meet, and we could say a extraterrestrial in a higher density state, they're still trying to ascend to the next level as well. And I know that some of these beings that we could even perceive as positive, if we're doing trade or deals with the lower extraterrestrials, which are at our level, though not on a public level, they might try to con us or take advantage, this, that, and the other. We've got to take our own sovereignty as a human race, which we're a conglomerate of many different intelligences, embrace the human experience and know that we're going to go through that, and most likely in most cases have already, which is why we're here to help elevate this experience here, which I can't prove. I know that to be true from my own experiences, but it's something I'm looking at, everything going on, and people don't understand unless they've got the compassion from a certain level of consciousness where you get it. And of course, it doesn't mean I get it all, but I get that, when people say there's no positive and negative, I understand that now from my perspective. Doesn't mean I endorse the child trafficking and all the other stuff that's going on at all. But I get it, and I understand what's going on because I've experienced it and I've been shown it to an extent. And so that's what led me to where I am now, of helping people to empower themselves.
Thank you guys for watching. Please stay tuned for part 2 that comes out next week. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
Our healthcare system